So our first presenter is Brian Lewis. He's the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, TTOC, as well as the president of the Caribbean Association of National Olympic Committee, CANOC. He was recently appointed to the Association of National Olympic Committees, ANOC, Modernization Commission. Lewis has 32 years experience in sports leadership and an executive master's degree in sports organization management from the University of Claude Bernard. This highly respected president of TTOC has established a reputation as a creative and insightful thought leader. So I will actually leave you and I will give it all over to you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm looking at the participation list. It's also in some places good afternoon and in some places good evening. It's a beautiful morning here in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and we are at the headquarters of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, and it's absolutely fantastic because part of this particular webinar is part of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee's emphasis and full-scale jump into transformation and into the new world order. I must say that we have been planning and talking about this since 2013, and COVID-19 has been an accelerator. It's at that point that I want to share some thoughts. I know that we have some excellent presenters coming after that will address some specifics and detail. I am going to set the stage for the theme. It is growth, innovation, innovate, and transformation. What has COVID-19 facilitated? What is COVID-19? What has been the catalyst forward? In a very real way, when you talk about growth, innovate, which is innovate, which means inside, out. Transformation speaks to change, transforming. If you did something yesterday, transformation suggests that you'll do something different this morning. But what is the reality? Growth. Growth also speaks to you have to have roots to grow, a strong foundation. What has COVID-19 done? In very many ways, COVID-19 has been like a hurricane. It has been like World War II. And I mean, I'm not being dramatic in saying that. When you look at the impact of COVID-19 across the world, not just the Caribbean, not just any one particular region. Countries that were once considered developed and first world and advanced societies have shown themselves to be not as ready for what has happened with COVID-19. And what is the relevance of that to what we are talking about today? And what is the relevance of transformation? Because it really speaks to attitude. Many of us just aren't prepared mentally, emotionally, cognitively, psychologically for the new world order. Whether it is based on years of socialization, years of being accustomed to doing things exactly how we do it, years of thinking one particular way, addressing problems in a particular way. COVID has changed almost everything. The thinking that we have had and the thinking that we engaged pre-COVID, during COVID, will not stand the test of post-COVID. And that is why no matter what organization you are involved in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a structured organization, it could be homes, communities, any type of gathering, whether formal or otherwise. What is required now, above anything else, is leadership. And let me stress here, that leadership does not, in my view, necessarily have to do with a formal position of leadership. The reality is that each one of us will be required to be leaders. In my view, whether it is the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, the Trinidad and Tobago Commonwealth Games Association, any organization involved in sport or not, if we don't have a collective of individual leaders, we will struggle. A case in point, if you look at closely at a lot of the utterances, a lot of the perspectives that have been coming out, whether it's sport or the economy, politics, it's very much driven by an old way of thinking. Yes, we all say the nice things that it's a new normal and we have to change and we will do this differently. Technology is now important. We have to look at things different. But in the main, what people are saying and what they are doing, there's this gap. There's no real transformation. What we're really doing is engaging in exchange, not change. For example, I saw recently various sporting organizations suggesting that government needs to help, that they're looking at sending a national team or teams out. Now, how is that possible in the reality of COVID-19? Do we really believe that we will put ourselves, our athletes, our children, our youths at risk in sending them out now or in the next couple of months? Is it realistic, given the economic and financial devastation worldwide in terms of the impact of COVID-19? Is it realistic to expect money to be there? And that's, to me, an example of saying one thing and acting another way. Because it means that we are not, and we have not, grasped the harsh reality of COVID-19. So to make and to engender transformation, we need to sit back and have a conversation, a dialogue, as if we have actually thrown the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. We have to sit down and look at this new world as if it's a blank page, as if nothing that we have done before is now relevant to the post-COVID-19 world. And as if that wasn't good enough, or that wasn't enough, whether it is the universe, whether it is destiny, whether it is the higher intelligence, whatever you choose to call it, on top of COVID-19, which is the disease caused by the virus, which actually is a small micro whatever they call it, microcosm, with a crown, shaped as a crown. Isn't that interesting and symbolic? But if that weren't enough, we now have to deal with the reality of Black Lives Matter. And don't matter how you try to dance it, minimize it, diminish it, it is real. It is going to have an impact in addition to COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19 world, how we deal with this reality. It's not just technology, that's a given. It's not just the physical space and reality. It's not just the social order. It's not just prioritization. Things have changed. This generation is not the generation just before it or the generation gone. Those involved in sport leadership, for example, who are of a earlier vintage, let me put it that way, must realize that you are involved with a new generation, a modern generation that is not as patient, is not as forgiving, and isn't as tolerant as previous generation. In addition, they are social media savvy, digital savvy, whatever else savvy. How do you create transformation in such an environment? How do you create transformation if you are going to hold on to old ways of doing things and put yourself forward as being fit for purpose for this transformational environment? And let me say this. In effect, we're in a crisis situation. So the kind of leadership that you require in this situation may not be the type of leadership you require later down the road. And that is also something that we must be aware of. It is also important to genuinely and sincerely engage, embrace, empower all stakeholders. Post-COVID, Black Lives Matter environment, it's not about top-down. The wisdom and the vision doesn't only reside at the top. If you look at what is happening, it's from the ground up. Revolutions, disruption, transformation, innovation occurs from the bottom up. And that is going to be very important in terms of when we talk about transformational leadership. If you see me looking all over the place, is that I'm very sensitive and aware to time. And we have two excellent moderators, so I have to make sure I take a cue from them. So I've been told I have 5 minutes. So 5 minutes will go very fast, especially if you're enjoying yourself. And I am, I don't know about you. What I would like to sort of hope and engender is thought. I've sat in too many webinars, meetings, where the people in the room, the people in the webinar, the people in the meetings, it's almost like they're going through the motion. It's almost like they're just saying things, but you could look and you could see by actions that they don't mean it. Because change or transformation or innovation or growth is not something that we all as human beings are comfortable with, because we like to hold on to our safety zone, our safe zone. We see change, we see transformation, We see growth and innovation as unknown and uncertain. It takes us out of our comfort zone. We may feel that we don't know enough about technology, digital, and we may be at the lifeline where it is about starting over. Oh gosh, you mean I have to go back and learn this thing all over. We may not understand how this modern generation thinks, how the athletes of this generation think, how the youth, the young people, how public, how social media operates. Why? I didn't intend to say that. I didn't mean that. So why am I getting canceled on social media or dragged on social media? Because the thinking. So unless we are prepared to make the change from inside and be willing to make that change, transformation, innovation, growth will just be that. A nice word, a nice theory, and we would have lost the opportunity in the crisis that is COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. I take this opportunity to thank you. I've gotten my cue. I thank you very much for being patient and listening attentively. I am quite sure you will have an excellent couple of hours, thought-provoking and otherwise. So I now hand you over to Giselle Laron West and Rhea Richardson. Thank you. Brian Lewis, out.
Thank you very much, Brian. Wow. Now, we did tell you he was insightful, and he was an insightful thought leader, that he is. He will have to probably leave us in a little while, but thank you very much, Mr. Lewis.
Very welcome.
I hope you heard that. Okay, so, I mean, he talked about COVID-19, saying that it has changed everything. He talked about the internal growth, knowing that there has to be some sort of change within and inside of us. Transformation, how do we go forward? How do we change how we do things? How do we change the norms? He talked about having collective individual leaders. So we're no longer looking for leaders. We have to now become our own leaders. And each of us are required to become leaders in our own spheres. He talked about narrowing the gap between what people are saying and what we're actually doing. Too much talk. We need to actually start doing and taking action. We are currently engaging in exchange and not change. And he wants us to make that change. He wants us to change how we see things, how we do things. We asked the question, is it realistic to expect money to be available to send our athletes out to compete? As if nothing has changed. So again, we're talking about change. He also gave a very insightful thought about the new generation, how impatient they are. They look at patience. We look at, are they forgiving? Right? Are they tolerant? We need to ask that question. And of course, they're technologically savvy. So how they use technology.
And how do we include them in the conversation when it comes to change?
Correct. So let us use COVID as a thought.
And the crux of it, for change. He says, throughout all this, we have to be prepared for the change. So we would see change as a constant thread in his conversation. And if we're not prepared for that change, it's transformation, innovation, and growth. What happens to it? It will all be in vain. So we must grasp this opportunity so that it won't become a lost one. So we want to thank Brian Lewis, President of the TTOC, CANOC, and TTCGA for being a part, the first presenter to open this webinar series. Next, we have Kevin Jean, who's an avid sport administrator. He currently heads the UE Open Campus Academy of Sport, an organization focused on academic and technical sport programming, sport activities, and outreach. Kevin holds a first degree in sport management, a master's in public sector management, and is currently pursuing his PhD in public policy, with an emphasis on sport policy and evaluation. This morning, Kerwin will be speaking to us on rethinking administrative strategies. So sit back, listen. Please, I encourage you to use the question and answer on the platform. Any questions that you post up with present to Kervin and the other presenters at the end of their session. So Kervin, it's over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, moderator. And just to begin, I do think, yes, we are in dire straits in terms of the world economy as it stands right now. But I think for sport, it offers up opportunities for us all. It's not all doom and gloom. I do think during the regular operations, we are all normally at ends. National governing bodies, sport administrations tend to be focused on the practical side of things. We tend to go from planning from one event, one activity to the other. With events overlapping and then financial constraints, we tend to be running over ourselves more or less, trying to keep track. And in most times, the operational side of sport tends to overshadow the administrative side. Notwithstanding, the administrative side is more important when you look at longevity and long-term planning. So in this current situation, I do think it offers us an opportune moment to sit back, take a step back, to reassess our current position, look at the situation as it stands, and start looking inwards as opposed to looking outwards. With slowdown in sport, in some instances, a total halt, there's not much we can do. Some sports are offered the liberty in terms of continuity, in terms of those sports that are single-person individual sports, whereas team sports are more or less been crippled. We see a lot going on in the world with regards to the start of football, the NBA, and the other social distances and other measures that have been implemented to operate within this current cycle. But I do think, especially in the region right now, we have an opportunity to look at our administrations right now. Focus on what we have been doing, how can we do it better, and how we will move forward in the future in terms of alignment and strategic planning. When you look at administrative reform, for instance, how many executives actually sat down, look at the organizations, look at the ministries, look at how we operate, how we interact with stakeholders? Not much of that has been done. In most instances, we tend to prepare policy and strategic documents as a means to an end. We need to get money, so we need to prepare them so that they're action. But at the end of the day, do we implement those documents? Do we implement those plans? And I will leave it all to y'all to look at your little organizations and indicate, well, where you're at. We do have an issue in terms of policy implementation. Most policies are developed, operational plans, strategic plans are developed, but they are not implemented solely because we tend to focus on the operational side of things. So I think currently we need to look at our administrations, look at how our makeup, how we are operating. For instance, when was the last time we engaged in strategic planning? And I don't mean just a foolhardy approach at strategic planning, but actually engaging our stakeholders, our clubs, our athletes, understanding what their plight is, what our sport needs, coming together collectively and putting a full robust plan together to basically intercede within the operations and create that pathway for development that we so desperately need. We also look at operational planning. How much of us actually stick to our operational plans? We need to do that. And another big aspect I think that we need to look at as well is how we run our sporting organizations. At a ministerial level, we know we have a lot of politics. Sports has been highly politicized, to be honest with you. We know that. We try to work around it, but the truth of the matter is it has. Some organizations, some countries, Trinidad and Tobago inclusive, have tried to move away from it with regards to proposing the development of sport commissions. So there's that hands-off approach of the operations and management of sport from governmental interference. Where are we with that at the current moment? Is that something that we need to focus on? Because it is clear as day right now that we cannot rely on government financing. It wasn't working properly before. Some persons would have benefited, some organizations, some individuals would have benefited from that, athletes as well. But moving forward, is it sustainable? More so when you look at anything that happens economically, if there's a drop in the gross income of the countries, the GDP, the first person or the first ministry is to get a cut in sport. That trickles down to our sport administrations and our sport organizations. So then, are we going to continue to rely on government funding? Should we not start looking at business opportunities and changing how we operate as organizations? Should we then focus on how can we look at what we're doing now? How can we transition to a point where we actually generate income and utilize, for instance, government revenue or government funds to focus on developmental programs, that is grassroots sport development, whilst we seek external funds, or we actually generate external funds to focus on our elite athlete and high high performance athlete development. We need to look at, sit down carefully, plan, look at those issues and how we navigate those issues. Our stakeholders, for instance, during my tenure at the ministry, one of the issues that we had with a lot of the national governing bodies of sport was with regards to data collection, identifying where your participation base is, identifying the age groups of your participants. A lot of that information was absent, to be honest with you. Now you have a chance to actually capitalize on this downturn. Focus on your stakeholders. How do we gather information from our stakeholders? A lot of organizations have moved from the whole physical approach to the online approach. And I think now we could do that. You have a number of platforms that you could utilize to gather information from your stakeholders. How many of us as NGBs have, from the time this thing started, engaged our stakeholders in actual strategic planning, meeting, discussions to identify, okay, where we are now, how do we go from there to here where we want to be, and what evidence do we have to support that move that we have made? How many of us? And that is a question that we need to answer. If I ask any NGB, we do have a lot in the chat right now. If I ask any of you, what is your participation base? Where are most of your athletes, where are most of your stakeholders located geographically in Trinidad and Tobago? How many of you could actively answer that question for me? And I think data collection is a major part of sport development, more so as we move from the whole practical and hands-on approach to a more scientific-based approach towards sport development. You need to gather data or have data on your particular sport and your stakeholders so that you could leverage that data towards development and getting funding in the future. Not only that, but also to assess your position as also your policy priorities. So I think in this current situation, we have an opportune moment to look at where we are, where we're going, where we want to go. One of the issues that has been a burning topic for me, especially in terms of policy, in Trinidad and Tobago particularly, and throughout the region, we have a lot of countries now engaging in policy reform, policy development, policy evaluation. Trinidad in 2017, 2018, the new policy was launched. How many organizations have actually taken the time to realign their strategic plans to that new policy? How many of us have actually actioned some of those items from that policy that influences what we do and how we do it? We need to understand the one thing that has to be taken out. Policy identifies what your stakeholders want, what the government wants, and the governmental direction for sport development. So if your policy is not in sync with the national policy, if your strategic plan, is not in sync with the national policy, you are basically outside of that circle with regards to applying for government funding, getting and accessing government funding as well. So we need to have those policy alignments. So a part of this current situation in terms of transformation is looking inward at our administrations, how we organize ourselves, how we align to the national mandates, and how we move forward post this. One of the major aspects I would like to put to everyone is your athletes. How many of us have engaged our athletes at this point? Is it that we just put them on a side, deal with the current situation as we think, and then after everything is all done, well, pick them back up and say, hey, let's continue, let's start it off? Is that approach that we will undertake? It's normally said that during times of calamity, one of the best things to do from an academic standpoint is to go back to school. With some of our athletes facing this downtime, how much of us have actually engaged them in terms of career planning? How many of us have actually kind of lead them in the way of, hey, you're on a downtime, you cannot practice your sport as is. Some of them do, but some don't. What are you doing to get by? How are you holding up mentally, emotionally? I do think we had at the faculty level, we had a number of forums and we dealt with the psychological effects this has had on athletes, and it's astounding. So I think athlete care is also something that we need to take into consideration in terms of our planning post this period. We tend to look at one aspect of the operations of sport and in terms of athletes, and we drive our athletes into the ground, but are we looking at the development of our athletes holistically? If we're talking about holistic sport development, we need to support our athletes and give them the resources that they need. And a lot of us tend to focus on what is happening now. Let's get it done. But look, I think we need to step outside ourselves, step outside of the box and look at what is happening internationally and frame our operations in that standpoint. One of the aspects I would like to put together to all of persons here as well is your club development. Do we actually participate in the clubs operations? Do we give our clubs resources? Do we help our clubs develop? Understanding that athletes come up through clubs, and it's the clubs who make up the majority of your membership. If you have dysfunctional clubs, you're going to have a dysfunctional sport administration at an NGB level. You need to understand that. So what happens at the club levels trickles up into your administration. So I think now, in terms of redefining how we are administratively, it's not just about the alignment of your policies, your strategic and operational plans in line with what the government has proposed, in line with what the future holds, but it's also in terms of what your stakeholders need. Focusing on your stakeholders, your club. This is its current time to fix your house, so to speak. So I think persons need to step outside of the box a bit, look at where we are as administrators, as sport administrators, focus on what has to happen. Do we have the necessary skill sets required to push or to drive our organizations, say for instance, in the near future, 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, what are we doing? Do we have any developmental programs where we train up and coming youth or other individuals to ascend into the positions of leadership? Or are we just gonna live it and take it for a fact that we are here until we run out? Do we have any future planning going on within our sport administrations? And if your answer to all of those things is no, I think then we are at the point where you need to look at that serious transformational leadership and go back to the drawing board. Engage your staff, your NGBs, get assistance. There is assistance at the TTOC, there's assistance at the level of the university, to be honest. The Open Campus Academy of Sport is also open to working with individuals, but at this point, we cannot sit by idly and let our progress slip away. We need to think outside of the box. So in addition to the fact that we need to align our policies, look at our strategic plans, our operations, look at how we deal with our stakeholders, put plans in place for the future, I think we need to focus on one, business development, sport development in its entirety, and a complete overhaul of the sporting frameworks within the various nations as we speak, specifically in the Caribbean. It's not just dealing with athletes, it's not just our administrations, because you could want to develop, say for instance, you could have aspirations for development, but it's tantamount to going to a builder, you're living in a 4x4 shack, and you tell the builder that you want a 3-story mansion, but then that it is built on that same foundation of that 4x4 shack. Eventually, what you're gonna find is everything is gonna crumble. And in some areas in sport, this is what we do. We build on the fund system, so then we get to a point and everything crumbles because we didn't do the necessary work in the foundations. And I think this is where we're at now. We are forced, and thanks to COVID somewhat, we are forced now to go back to the drawing board, reinforce our foundations, look at those little things that we take for granted, but actually impact our sport at the highest level, and then focus on retraining our minds, transforming our current operations into what may be future prospects. So I do think this is where we're at now, and Chair, I revert back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kervin. Thank you for that insightful and comprehensive discourse. He spoke about transformation. He spoke about rethinking our strategies, taking the opportunity now to engage our stakeholders, clubs, athletes. He spoke about athlete care, holistic athlete care. What are we doing right now in our NGBs? What are we doing right now in our clubs? Do we have programs going on? Think about it. So Kervin, we have 1 or 2 questions here for you in the chat. One person asked, should we impose term limits on administrators of NGBs? This could be a vehicle to allow transformation, evolution, youth involvement, new ideas, embracing technology and vibrancy. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think we need to impose term restrictions on executives. I think persons tend to get into positions of sport and think, okay, I don't want to move. I don't think in terms of humanity, that's not how things are supposed to work. It's supposed to be you come in, you add to what is already there, extend on the foundations, then you hand over the battle to who's coming behind you. That is how it's supposed to push on. I do think in sport, we have that issue, and I do think term limits, but we should also remain cognizant of the fact of that time limit. Understand, I think some NGBs have 2-year term limits. I think we need to focus and revisit that aspect of it, because if you're in sport, you know how sport runs. If you come into an NGB in September, or later at any point in the year, your first year will basically be learning about the operations. That is a year. And in addition to learning about that operation, you still have to contend with the ongoing operations. That is tough. The second year, you're just getting your foot in, and that's when you're actually starting to plan for the future. So by the time, if you're a 2-year administration, you don't have time. So yes, we do need to have term limits, but we also need to remain cognizant of the fact that it has to be a realistic limit. So something that could give enough time to come in, identify what is going on, assess where we are, make changes that would actually further the development of the organization.
Okay, thank you for that one. We have another question. How do you suggest we address the gap or potential disconnect between national policies and NGB NSO strategic plans? So you chatted about it. Could you go further into this?
Well, that one is fairly easy, to be honest with you. And that the onus of that falls actually on not only the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs, the executory agency of sport in Trinidad and Tobago. If you're around the region, those sport administrations like the ministries and other executory agencies, anytime a new policy is developed, that policy has to be integrated into the national framework. So it means you have to have workshops on that policy with the relevant stakeholders to let them know how their operations are going to be expected to change to align to that policy. It cannot be that you develop a policy and then you leave the NGBs and the organizations on their own. You have to integrate that policy, and there has to be policy mainstreaming that persons know what is expected of them, what role they will play in the implementation of that policy, and how it will affect them. So with regards to the administrative organizations, it has to be that some kind of engagement and education going on, programs to help them implement the policy, and then we have that transition going on.
All right, thanks. I'm allowing you to put in the next plug for Open Campus. We have one comment or question here. How do we contact your organization to get assistance to realign our NGB?
Well, it's kind of, I don't want to take away from this, but the information will be made available to the TTOC so that it will be shared with everyone in terms of accessing the services that we offer at the UWI Open Campus Academy of Sport. Additionally, I will add that the organization has taken great lengths during this current time to transition. Well, the Open Campus has been leading in online education as is. But in terms of sport development, what we're doing is developing those short courses as well as advanced level education certification for various organizations and individuals. In fact, about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I sent out information with regards to short courses that would enable not only ministries, but other organizations to capitalize on this downtime so that they can build capacity across those organizations. So that information will be shared with you guys as well through the TTOC.
Good, so we look forward to seeing that, and people, we have another avenue for learning and for information. Another question at you, what tangible changes would you propose to deal with policy implementation through operational plans?
I think first and foremost, when we're planning, we need to get out of the mindset that we're just planning or developing documents to gain funding or just to satisfy a reporting requirement. We need to actually sit down, understand our sports, our various administrations, where we are, where we want to go, look at the policy areas that actually support that thrust, interline those operations with the policy and move forward that way. One, that would actually put you in good footing with the governmental body responsible with the responsibility for sport. So you can then show that this is what the national mandate is, this is what my mandate is, assisting you in achieving the national mandate. This is the funding I require. Additionally, you could then put it in a greater context in terms of seeking grant funding from external bodies to show, and that is something they look at, how does your operations impact the administrations of the national administration? So that aligns as well. And there's a lot more that can be said, but again, we have limited time, but I would feel free to engage me afterwards and I would then talk you through it.
Okay, we have one more question. I believe you spoke to it, but I will ask, should sporting bodies form part of the policy making or adjust to policies being made?
No, by all means, a policy is basically a national policy. If you look at national sport policy, it is basically made up by the sporting community, because through the consultations, you all would have submitted remarks, you all would have submitted your suggestions, and the policy was built on that. So you all definitely are a part. It would be absurd to make a plan for somebody and not invite them to the table. So national administration have to be part of the planning process. And then in terms of policy development, they have to be engaged regularly. And I do think as it relates to evaluation as well, we need to maintain that contact, which is why you submit plans, your updates regularly to the Ministry of Sport so that they can then identify how far along the implementation process they are. So I do think it is important for you to have that.
Okay. So, Kevin, I just want to thank you. Thank you for your insightful discourse, linking Brian's topic on transformational leadership to how we should rethink our administrative strategies. Right now, I'm going to bring back in Mr. Brian Lewis. He had to step out to attend a session, but he's back with us now, and he's here to answer some of your questions. So Brian, please join me.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much. So I will give my slip with 3 questions, which I'll hope to answer quickly so that I don't prolong the program unnecessarily. I apologize for those who are, you're not seeing it, but we are practicing social distancing for those who have a concern. So one of the questions we got was, what kinds of strategies is the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee doing or has adjusted in consideration of the pandemic situation? And that question has come from Hansika of the Sri Lanka National Olympic Committee. And I know there are some other heads, so thank you very much, Hansika and the National Olympic Committee of Sri Lanka for joining in. So the Olympic Committee has focused on 3 essential strategic pillars in the COVID-19 environment. One, we have gone entirely in the short term to digital and online in terms of all our programs, Olympic Day coming up, Olympic Month, the Women in Leadership Forum, everything in the foreseeable future, at least for the rest of this year, will be online virtual. That's an important strategic pivot. The office has been closed since March 16th, and we have not shut down operation. We have worked with a stay-at-home, work-from-home policy, and that has engendered us to have a deep look at our human resource policy as it relates to making it fit for purpose for the digital online environment. And importantly, we have upped the ante on our risk management strategy, and we have focused a lot on protecting our balance sheet and our assets, and protecting cash flow in terms of, in a crisis, liquidity is very important. So those are the 3 important things. And the other aspect is that what you're really seeing here today is a soft launch, so to speak, of a very important strategic pivot for the TTOC. In that, welcome to the studios of Olympic House at 121 Abercrombie Street. You will hear much more about it, but that's the whole, as I said, we have thrown out the baby with the baby water in terms of our marketing strategy. And what you're really seeing now is a soft launch of Team TTO TV and the Team TTO Media. So that's why I look very excited, because, I mean, yes, we'll have little hiccups, but it's history being made. So you're actually seeing the soft launch of Team TTO TV, Team TTO Media with our 2 presenters. So that's why the setting and everything is such. So that answers hopefully your question, Hansika. You can feel free to email me offline, you and your president, Mr. President Maxwell, if you have any additional questions. The other question is, what are the 3 specific changes do you expect to see in the sporting industry? One, I expect, when I look in the crystal ball, that a number of national sporting organizations to survive in the short term will come out of the high performance business and focus on physical activity, recreation, and leisure, right? In terms of, because one of the things that COVID-19, I must remember I'm not going on a second version of my feature, but one of the things that COVID-19 has unearthed is the most vulnerable are those with underlying conditions, and therefore non-communicable diseases. I think a number of NSOs, National Sporting Organization, will realize that high performance sport is not their core business. I think that's going to be an important change because it's going to be one of survivability and sustainability. The second one is, I see in the future, collective marketing approach to create economies of scale. I see a number of national sporting organizations probably using the umbrella of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, engaging the Olympic Committee in a collective approach to create economies of scale when we go to market. That's two. And the third one is I see a greater involvement of fans and spectators as key stakeholders in NSOs. The other question, in some sports, parents are more impatient than athletes. How do we manage this in the new normal? Yes, I'm being silent because how do you tell a parent not to interfere with their child? You know, parents feel that there's nobody could protect their child better than them, and it's a sensitive issue. So I think it requires dialogue. I think that if parents are impatient, it also speaks to the fact of a breakdown of trust. They don't trust the system, they don't trust the process, they don't trust their child's future and welfare with an NSO. So I think greater dialogue has to be done. So on that note,
I have one more question that came up. What do you think are some of the old stubborn roots that currently exist in TT's sporting culture?
you will what?
Stubborn roots.
Old stubborn roots.
That prevent sport from in Trinidad and Tobago from truly growing in the way that it needs to grow.
Old way of thinking.
Old way of
My
thinking.
experience is that a number of the very committed, dedicated, well-intentioned sport leaders, coaches, etc., have come up in a different era and environment, and they are not reacting well to the changes that need to be made. So I hear somebody ask a question about term limits. The TTOC has had term limits for quite a while. I know some organizations have gone that way. So a lot of the sports administrators also have grown up with children must be seen and not heard. And for them, the athletes, the youth and the young people are children, so that they don't want to, you know, children must be seen and not heard.
So COVID-19, again, that opportunity to stop,
Yeah,
hard stop.
reset, a hard stop,
Reset,
refocus, reflect.
yes.
Yep,
And
for
then
sure.
move forward.
And as I was saying earlier on, it's amplified by Black Lives Matter. It's not going to be the same. The whole disruption has taken place, and those who do not embrace the change will become dinosaurs in a very short order. So on that note, I'm getting the signal from the director, one of the directors, cut. So folks, thank you very much. I'm out.
Thank you, Brian.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Lewis. So at this time, we take the opportunity to now bring on Mr. Stacey Cato, Senior Instructor at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Stacey is going to speak to us on innovation, the key to industry transformation. So Stacey, it's over to you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So I'd just like to thank TTOC for this opportunity to share one or two things on the topic of innovation. I would not be focusing on COVID-19. The reason for that is, in my opinion, the need for change and transformation has existed for quite a while now. And as I believe Mr. Lewis hinted earlier, COVID-19 is just an accelerator, right? I know that we all, in the industries throughout the Caribbean, we have all recognized this need for change. And I believe that innovation is definitely an important aspect if this change that we desire to see becomes a reality. So what is innovation? Innovation is merely an introduction of a new idea that adds value to an organization and allows it to solve problems and issues And this idea could be a new product, a new service, new process, or new strategy. It's limited only by the organization. You can have innovation in almost every aspect of organizational activity. But it's important to know that innovation is also a learning process that organizations must learn to adapt. And we go into that process as the slides progress. Why innovate? We innovate so our organizations remain relevant to the industry and society and stakeholders that we serve. We also innovate to grow, to engage new supporters and members. And we also innovate to add value to our product. And this value at times enables monetization by sponsorship or commercialization of our product. And how is this innovation done? Simply by creating a product or service that is valuable, rare, and difficult to imitate. Now, it's also important for us to understand that opportunities for innovation are found in the environment around us. Every organization exists simultaneously surrounded by three environments. Our internal environment, which speaks to the strengths and weaknesses that exist in our organization. The industry environment, which speaks to the threats that are posed by our competition. And the external environment, which deals with the opportunities and threats that are posed by the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors that surround us. The opportunities for innovation are to be found in this environment. And there are several opportunities for innovation. They probably are innumerable, but I just want to look at a few here. So, inconsistencies in the environment. A big inconsistency that I see in Trinidad and Tobago is in the sport of football, where we probably have as much as 250,000 football supporters, all who have bought into Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Manchester United. But in terms of the professional football league locally, if we get 50 people in a stadium, that is plenty. There is an inconsistency in the environment that offers an opportunity to innovate. Whenever our processes are broken or not working properly or not working to their maximum potential, that also offers opportunities to innovate. Are we content with the processes that currently exist in our organization and in the environment? You know, if we are not content, we need to be innovating some new processes, demographic changes, changes in the population due to gender, or changes due to age. We need to exploit these demographic changes. Firstly, we need to be knowledgeable that they exist and develop some innovative means to exploit. Right? New knowledge. And a good example of new knowledge would be in the communication usage that most sport organizations make use of currently. With every year and a new social media platform developing, our communication strategies change. That is a simple example of how we use new knowledge to innovate. So it is important for us to understand our environment and in turn use the opportunities we have to innovate. Now, the good thing is West Indies has a history of innovation in sport. West Indies cricket between 1977 and 1979, Clive Lloyd and Rudy Webster, cricket existed in an environment where we had a talented team not meeting with international success. Clive Lloyd and Rudy Webster together created a brand of cricket that ruled the world for over 20 years. And there were several innovations in that brand, right? The creation of a four-man pace quartet you know, the hiring of a full-time fitness coach. All of these were innovations that West Indies cricket adopted. Professional football in Trinidad and Tobago. In the early to mid 1980s, Arthur Sweet developed a professional football team by the name of ASL. The environment that existed then was that our secondary school football competitions regularly drew crowds of between 15 to 20,000 spectators. Our players were talented, but yet were underperforming at international level. What Arthur Sweet did, he developed this professional team and he bought teams from abroad to give them competition. So during that period, Arsenal, Tottenham Hotspurs, top Brazilian teams all visited Trinidad and Tobago. Right? A matter of fact, between 1976 and 1987, 121 professional teams visited this country. And by 2000, there were 50 professional footballers from Trinidad and Tobago active in Europe. And by 1989, we were competing for World Cup qualification. Strike Squad. In 1989, Gary Cummings created a system of football. Trinidad and Tobago had been struggling for 15 years to translate our obvious talent into a competitive attempt at World Cup qualifying. Gary Cummings created a system that took into being our culture, our skill set of our players. We missed qualification by 1 point and rose to the top of the Caribbean football, and we became a feeder of world-class talent, such as Dwight York and Russell Latapy. I think at one time, we had about 6 or 7 players in the English Premier League. Jamaica, in 1988, they competed in the bobsled at the Winter Olympics in Calgary. The environment was they bought an old product. Winter Olympics was an old product, but they bought it to a new market, Jamaica. And as a result of that, Jamaica has qualified for at least 7 Winter Olympics since then. A Hollywood movie has been written about and developed and produced, and sport tourism opportunities are still being capitalized on. In 1999, in track and field in Jamaica, a coach by the name of Stephen Francis founded a sport club by the name of MVP Track and Field. Jamaica had been successful at world and Olympic levels, but their top athletes still had to journey to the US college system. In other words, the system was broken. He started to produce homegrown talent. And of course, he developed a business model that facilitated this. The result is, over the last 21 years, Jamaica has produced several homegrown world and Olympic champions, such as Asafa Powell, Usain Bolt, Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, Johan Blake, and the list goes on and on. It was started by this one guy producing homegrown talent. Now, these are all breakthrough innovations. But what I want our sport organizations to be cognizant of is the fact that the vast majority of innovations are in fact ordinary innovations that just create a better product or service. Right? We can have innovation in almost any area of organization of existence or organizational management, as I said before. We could, in the manufacturing sector, if a product changes color, it is termed an innovation, a product enhancement, right? Now, the importance of these ordinary innovations are they are the bedrock of helping organizations to sustain itself. It is important that organizations renew themselves and renew their products on a month-to-month and year-to-year basis in order to gain a competitive advantage in the industry. And the key to these sustaining innovations are creating an innovative organization. Your organization has to find a way to insert innovation in its strategies, in its systems, and in its structures. And this can be done by looking at the way we do things differently as an organization. We need to incorporate innovation in our strategic planning. We need to develop some kind of product development process. We need to develop cultures that support innovation. We need to create knowledge-based organizations, and we need to foster a new type of leadership. Strategic planning process, we need to have goals and objectives that contain innovation in them, right? It is simple. Include innovation in our strategic planning process. It is important. We need to commit our organizations to a product development planning process. Now, most organizations in the manufacturing world, they have a 5-stage process, moving from idea to concept, product development, test marking, and then commercialization. It is not necessary for our organizations to develop a 5-step process, but it is important that we recognize that innovation is a process, and our organizations must find ways to embed this process in our systems. This is important because creating a new product increases the life cycle, increases the life of our product. And if the life of our product or service is increased, in turn, the life of our organizations are also renewed. Culture. It is important that our organizations find ways to facilitate cross-functional teams working together. It is important for our organizations to now encourage a cross-pollination of ideas. And it is important for the rank and file of the organization and their thoughts and opinions to be accessible to the leadership. Our organizations now have to become knowledge-based. We must learn to harness both extrinsic and intrinsic knowledge. So not only will the knowledge gained in textbooks and on computer databases now be important, but the knowledge that is in the shared experiences and training of our athletes, of our stakeholders, of parents involved in the organization. These shared experiences must also be harnessed. And it is all towards generating new ideas. And the generation of new ideas are the foundation of innovation. Leadership. Leadership is the foundational competitive advantage for an organization's success. Leadership has to manage the implementation of strategy and be the encouragers, be the literal sponsors of innovation in their organizations. It is important that leadership now must be shared and collaborative. The time for authoritarian management and leadership has passed. Leadership must now learn to respect, value, and harness the richness of ideas, backgrounds of every employee, of every athlete, of every spectator, every stakeholder. It is important for leadership to be the ones stimulating creativity in the organizations. It is important now to challenge workers to produce fresh solutions to the problems that exist. Now, there is an end game to this innovation thing. The end game to innovation is actually a transformation of our industry. Innovation fuels competitive rivalry. And when we develop a cycle of innovation, you end up getting improved products, services, and process continually being developed. New industry standards are created, and the creation of a new industry equilibrium emerges. So if we were to look at the results of the West Indies innovations that I spoke of earlier, the West Indies cricket team became a dominant force for the next 20 years. And even after our performance dropped, we were still able to demand good fees from Australia and England when we toured there. Even though performance had dropped for years, we were still in demand because of our style of play. Following the ASL professional team that was created and Gary Cummings' creation of a new system in 1989, by 2000, Trinidad and Tobago had 50 professional footballers based in Europe. Jamaica and the Winter Olympics, that story is still being written, but there is still a lot of sport tourism value to that original bobsled escapade, and Jamaica still continues to be a major presence at Winter Olympiads. And with Jamaica track and field is now, literally at the top of the world, right? The sky is the limit for where Jamaican track and field can reach. So these are just a few pointers on innovation, how innovation can be executed, and the results of innovation. I sincerely believe that the time for innovation has been here quite a while now. We can no longer remain doing the same things as we have done for the last 15 or 20 years. The time for change is here. So thank you very much. That would be my presentation.
Thank you very much for that insightfulness in terms of innovation. We know that you're the expert when it comes to innovation. Just to bring up some things, that the opportunity in innovation is found in our environments. As you mentioned, you spoke about the internal environment, you spoke about the industry environment, and of course the external environment, which actually affects all that we do. And of course, you said to look at the different types of innovation. So you're encouraging everybody to look at the different types of innovation that there are, and to make sure and see that you can apply it, see how you can apply it to your organization, your specific organization. And to remember that the organizations must find a way to place innovation in all that you do, in your strategies, in your systems, and also in your structures, right? So that was very, very beneficial to us, Mr. Cato. I think there is a question.
There is one question, Ken. Is there any scientific proof to show that the examples you've used to highlight the innovations have created the successes that were achieved? Stacey?
Well, yes. Well, unfortunately, there is a dearth of academic research regarding sport in the Caribbean and the West Indies. So have there been any scientific studies done on these different innovations? I cannot say. I'm not too sure. But I would agree with Mr. Mustaq Mohammed that there is indeed a lot of room for academic research and to actually compile data on innovation in the West Indies. Of course, in other areas of industry, the manufacturing sector, food and beverage, I mean, there are loads of research that, you can scientifically get information to prove the impact of innovation. But as I said before, there is unfortunately a dearth of academic study in the area in the West Indies.
Correct, and you're quite right. I think it's important for all of us to actually see what sort of elements of or creative writing as well there is on innovation, to really spur us on, because many of us may not understand what is possible. And so we need to do the research, definitely, and to look into the data. We have another question here from John Thatcher. Says innovation is critical for the development and sustainability of sporting organizations. It requires a dynamic set of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. How can we leverage an investment in tertiary education training at the UWI and UTT regarding sport for development to impact on national sport development generally?
I would actually, the person who is best positioned to answer that question is Mr. Atto Ratcliffe, who I believe would be on after me. However, I would like to assure Mr. Thatcher that like I can only speak for the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Innovation is actually written into the mission of the university. So each academic unit is therefore mandated to include innovation even in its general syllabus and course outlines. So from our point here at UTT, we are trying to get that dynamism, that innovation needs in our course outlines, in our programming, in the design of our syllabi. So we have been trying, but I believe Mr. Atto Ratcliffe would be better positioned to answer that question regarding.
Okay. Can I answer that?
All right, great, thank you.
Kevin, you want to answer? Put in your 2 cents, I paid you.
Sure, I do. I think in terms of leveraging the investments at tertiary education, especially in institutional, especially speaking from the point of the Open Campus Academy of Sport, I think what is necessary at this point is capacity building. We do have a set of individuals who are accustomed to a particular way of thinking. And with innovation, it requires persons to step out of the box. Don't just follow what has been done before, to chart new pathways. And with education, first of all, you need to educate them. And in educating them, that is providing the necessary information required, then that will then empower them to then search outside of the norms. So I think it starts off with them identifying, yes, we need to be educated. You don't just jump off one morning off of the bed and say, you know what, I want to innovate. You need to know what areas you need to innovate in. You need to know how to go about doing it. And I think that is where capacity building through higher education comes in. And it's not just about getting a degree. There are capacity building courses available at the Open Campus as well. And I'm pretty sure at the University of Trinidad and Tobago that persons need to access. Additionally, it doesn't take much. The ministry is supposed to provide that kind of developmental assistance as well, the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago and other ministries across the region. So you need to bring it to the fore in terms of identifying, hey, what areas do we need assistance with? Even the TTOC, if you look at the number of developmental courses that the TTOC offers, that specifically get towards giving that information to individuals so that they can then go out and innovate. So the information is there. Persons just need to subscribe to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for that. So I allow Giselle right now.
May I just interject as well?
Go ahead.
One thing. I think another thing that sport organizations have to adopt is entrepreneurial thinking. You know, I think in many instances, Kevin was talking about building capacity. I think organizations need to actually build their internal capacities to innovate. And this can be done by viewing your organizations as entrepreneurial activities. You know, I think it's important that sport starts including that entrepreneurial aspect in our daily activities.
Correct. And again, we use this time during COVID and post-COVID to get ourselves ready, taking in these nuggets of information, leadership, transforming, growing, to develop ourselves, to relook and rethink how we want to move forward and to engage our stakeholders. So I allow Giselle right now to bring on Mr. Atto Ratcliffe.
Oh, but before I do that, I just want to thank everybody who's already put questions in the chat. For those of you who have not, please remember to do so. And also, I would like you to go back and look at the chat because some of the questions have been answered. So you can probably have a look at that. Our panelist today is Mr. Atto Ratcliffe. He's a lecturer at the Center for Kinesiology, Physical Education and Sport at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. He has a wealth of experience in sport for development initiatives, and with that is an advocate for using sport for social upliftment. So let us now welcome Mr. Atto Rockcliffe.
So Atto is going to speak on professional standards in sport. So Atto, give us an idea, what is professional standards in sport?
All right, thank you for having me, first of all. And I think the segue from the last question was excellent.
Excellent, yes.
Into this discourse. So there's a nexus, and a colleague early in the chat asked about scientific proof. I think the way we're supposed to be thinking about this is maybe scientific evidence, but not necessarily proof, because there's a different research design that would produce that proof we speak about. But there's a correlation, there's a nexus between certain things. So there's a correlation between where countries have a professional sporting environment and enjoying sporting success. There's a correlation or a nexus between countries with professional standard or a professional sporting environment and deriving the benefits from sport on several levels, not just on the competitive or high performance level, but on the more fundamental physical literacy, etc. levels. So the way I'm imagining it, or we are imagining it at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, is for us to start an intense conversation about how do we add professionalism to our sporting context by establishing, firstly, some national standards. And then I am thinking also establishing some professional body where our actors are licensed and approved. And of course, that will have to be, I guess, developed by the critical mass of sport actors in Trinidad and Tobago, like our colleagues at UWI, like our colleagues throughout at TTOC and the NGBs. But that conversation is fundamental to our transformation. And I consider that a key innovation for our sporting environment in this part of the world. But what often happens is we deliberate and deliberate and deliberate and not innovate. And I think it was the Kurt Lewin, social psychologist, who says there's no action like a good theory. So we have to properly theorize, and Kurt Lewin was brilliant, but it was Phil Knights who said sometimes we just do it. And after we have spent some time theorizing and having those critical conversations among our colleagues, we then need to start engaging in action research. This is what Kurt Lewin was promoting when he talked about no action like a good theory. We need to start engaging in action research and collecting the evidence to assess our progress. But we have to start to do this as soon as possible, because it will aid us in preserving the integrity of our athletes. It will aid us in widening the pool of athletes that we can source. We have talented and passionate athletes, but we're noticing at 17 or even 13 and 14, they're physically illiterate. They run with their legs going in different directions, which cause injuries at an earlier, and these things can be prevented. That is the sad part. And I take the point of my colleagues earlier, especially Mr. Jha, who spoke about the importance of training. But the truth is, we have been graduating students at the University of Trinidad and Tobago since 2012. We have students that are working in Dubai, in the UK. One of our students was just hired by Florida, FIU, as their strength and conditioning person, because there's no structure to use the knowledge and expertise in our culture. I've spoken to several NGBs that are dying for opportunities to engage the talents of our graduates, quite knowledgeable and competent actors, but there isn't a structure to facilitate that. And I'm not suggesting that the idea of national standard or professionalization of the sporting industry is the one solution, but in this era that we understand the power of science and multivariate analysis, we may be able to find that may be one of the critical mechanisms to getting us to a solution. But we would only know that if we start to work on that. and if we start that conversation among the critical mass. And I'm hoping that that is what we can start to do today in the spirit of transformation, in the spirit of innovation, and in the spirit of using what we understood for generations to be our most valuable resource, which is the human resource. And we have passionate ones, but more importantly and more pressingly, we have competent ones. As I articulated earlier, over 200 students graduated from the University of Trinidad and Tobago, the national university in terms of service to Trinidad and Tobago. We have students graduating from the UWI. I know the open campus is quite new and they're doing some innovative things, but we had a student who left here and went to Barbados and did a program at the UWI K-Ville campus, a master's there. And she's thinking of leaving again because there's limited opportunity for employment. And the research is clear that one of the key reasons people pursue tertiary education initially is to gain meaningful employment. And afterwards, as they get more mature, etc., they start to venture into things like service and passion and patriotism and so on. But I think the psychologist Maslow spoke about the hierarchy of needs. And if people cannot sustain their own livelihoods, I think we are doing a disservice to our industry and we will lose some of our best people. So I would be happy to have that conversation. Yes, Mike.
So I'm glad you raised that point with regards to every year, numbers of students come out of UTT, come out of UE through the sports management program or whatever programs that these tertiary education facilities have. What do we do? How do we engage them? What should be the area of focus if we are to purport or promote professional standards? The primary area of focus. Just a question.
That's a fantastic question.
I'm interested, but let me know. Tell me.
That's a fantastic question, a very necessary one. And I said we need to start with the conversation of, is this something we see as meaningful? Because this could just be misguided on my part. I conceptualized this. I had conversations with some of my colleagues. They thought it's a good idea, but we're only one stakeholder. We have really key partners in the TTOC and the UWI Open Campus and the Ministry of Sport, etc. We need to have a conversation. If we agree that this is an important direction to go, then we engage it and we conceptualize what it should look like. But let me get to the benefits of this. If we were to do that, we will eliminate some of the imposters. I've observed on many occasions people acting as physiotherapists, people acting as athletic trainers, and they did a 3-month or 4-month certificate on something, massage therapy or something. And that's great, fantastic. But I don't think we're doing ourselves a good service by allowing those actors, well-intended, but misguided, and as Mr. Jha said earlier, they do not have the requisite knowledge to perform those functions. So I believe that is a good place for us to start. So we agree on what those minimum standards should be at varying levels, and then we establish a body or something that we can manage and administer the licensure certificate or something. The doctors do it, the lawyers do it with accepting to the bar, etc. There's nothing that keeps us from doing that except ourselves.
Right. So Asha, we're going to make sure that we hold you to that, and so that you can help us develop that professional body that to put together those national standards to be established. And you talk about the fact that we all deliberate, and we don't innovate. So we need to start being aware of some of the things that we need to look at specifically and try to get together to deliberate to see how we can innovate. So I've twisted it a little bit there. But we have a statement here before I get to, I think it was either Kevin or Stacy trying to say something, but before I get to that, someone has put something here in the chat. The UWI Open Campus Academy of Sport, and by extension the UE Facility of Sport, has been and continues to develop developmental specific sport courses. As we speak, the OCAS is engaged in a number of professional sport courses and higher level degrees. I think there has to be a deliberate attempt to build capacity at the NGB and ministerial levels. It may well be that organizations such as TTOC, OCAC, UTT, Sport TT, to come together, pool resources to develop and deliver those courses. So it goes right back to just not deliberating, but to come together to form some sort of national stability, some sort of national system that could look at standards that will benefit everybody for us to really move forward, right? I can't remember, was it Kevin or Stacy? Did you want to say something?
It was me, Chair. I just want to piggyback off what Mr. Rockcliffe said a while ago, and what you just basically spoke of. I think it's important to know that, and just to double back a bit, when I made that analogy, when I made that statement with regards to building a 3-story house on a 4x4 build, that is exactly what I was speaking about. Because throughout the region, every single government has touted sport development. But if you look at the makeup of every single ministry with the responsibility for sport, they have largely gone unchanged from their inception to where they are today. So I think sport development has to start with the administrative bodies. And I would have put that in the chat in terms of the OCAS, the Open Campus Academy of Sport. We have made a deliberate attempt to engage with ministries across the region from the governmental level, so that they don't only understand what we are doing, but how we are doing it. Because it's pointless for you to go and develop capacity. Say, for instance, within the national level, you have sport psychologists, you have coaches, you have kinetics, sport kinetics persons graduating with higher degrees, and then they graduate and they don't have a place to go, simply because there isn't a space within the national framework to accommodate them. So I think when we develop, it is imperative that the government understands what development is, right? Understand what the needs of the particular jurisdiction are, and then create those spaces. Because you cannot have a ministry that has the same makeup as 40, 50 years ago. That makes no sense if you're touting sport development. So if you're saying you want to develop sport holistically and you want to expand into the avenue of sports science, then you need to create the positions, understand what they are going to be used for, how they are going to be used, and get those persons who are graduating to get them into those positions. And we have gone to great lengths to engage the ministry so they know what programs we are developing, what individuals are in those programs, as well as creating those avenues for internships, so that when persons come out of our sporting programs, they actually have a space to go to. And I think that's where it needs to start, at the governmental level, so that we create the framework needed to facilitate sport development. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm glad you mentioned the studies that you have, sorry, not the studies, but the courses that you have or the degrees that you have, because as NGBs, sometimes we're not aware fully what is being done, probably at the UTT level, at the UE level, so on and so forth, so that we know the human resource that is available to us probably 3 years hence or 2 years hence or whatever. So I'm glad you touched on some of the professions.
Yeah, and it's important actually for them to market to the NSOs, because at least they'll be aware of what is available, so that every time they see someone with a potential, you know, they can guide them in that direction. Yeah, and I also...
Sorry, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to bear reference to the fact that you were talking about us staying in 50 years from now and still in that same mode. And I just to draw reference to what Brian Lewis had said earlier about our new generation not being patient, not being forgiving, not being tolerant, you know, and also being technologically savvy. So we really need to really look at how different we can.
Ato, you had a comment there?
No, I was going to say that Mr. Jha was on point when he said that we need to engage the government at a very deliberate level, and more than engagement, we need to win them over, because we have these experts already. We have liaised with NGBs. NGBs have used the services of our students and were better off as a result of it, but they could not maintain the employment. So after maybe what do you call it, the OJT stint, they probably were able to source a bit of funding, and then after that, they just couldn't use the student anymore, the expertise. So the NGBs are clear that this is a benefit to them, but on the more, the wider level, the governmental level, there needs to be priority to using experts. And I believe it needs to be an investment, because soon enough, if the experts do what they're supposed to do, they can make NGBs much stronger and much more sustainable over time, because there are many avenues if we innovate appropriately for us to grow our practice as competent sport actors in this region.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Now, I just want to interject in the sense that how can we have that conversation with the ministries, with government, to really spur that on and really make them see how important it is for the development of sport in the future, for the sustainability of sport and the sustainability of our athletes, how do we have that conversation? I mean, I'm sure it's a conversation that's being happening in small pockets, but how do we make it bigger and real and let them understand also the innovation that's necessary to move forward and for sustainability, not just in sport, but generally?
Chair, if I may?
Yes, you may.
I think it starts off with, first off, how would I put it, the administrators within the ministry identifying with the fact that, yes, we need the assistance. We want to do this, or we want to go that way. Because we could send as many invitations as we possibly can to them. If they're not willing to accept that, hey, we need that assistance, then we're just, to use a local saying, we're just spinning top in mud. I think there has to be a concerted effort. The ministry has to look at itself, look at its own makeup, look at the policy. And I know for a fact, having worked there, that the national policy speaks towards that innovation, that merger of academics as well as sport. So the ministry then has to say, okay, if we're implementing that policy, we need to have that conversation with the academic institutions. And it's not just a conversation. We need to have a strategic planning meeting, more or less, because the ministry has to do that assessment internally to see where it's at, where it wants to go as per the policy mandates. And then we can sit with them to help them chart that pathway moving forward.
Stacey, you have any comments on it? Because this comes down to innovation. This comes down to maybe a process, developing a new, I don't know. But it comes back to how do we think creatively to make this happen?
I think a lot of the solution to the problems that exist actually may come from perhaps a bottoms-up approach. Perhaps the solutions may not lie in the halls and corridor of governance. Perhaps the solutions may lie in the clubs and community sport organizations and the innovations that they are able to make. So I tend to focus my sights on that level, rather, the ground level, so to speak. I think that the solutions to our problems may in fact lie there.
Right. So basically what you're saying is that we have to start feeding ourselves to be able to let people see and understand that we are making an effort. And then by extension, they will start at least lending a hand to move and push us forward.
If I may just build on those two contributions. I agree with Stacey 100%, but the role of the critical actors or the intelligentsia is to harness those contributions from the grassroots, from all the actors in the environment. And that is weird that we have to perform that role. To add to what Mr. Jar said, I think we need to understand the language necessary to communicate with governments. So Mr. Jar in his presentation quite aptly spoke about the politicization of sport, but I'm Aristotelian from a philosophical sense, and he talks about man by nature being a political animal. We cannot escape politics. Politics is an inescapable fact of our society. In sociology, they say it's one of the pillars of society. So what we need to do as the intelligentsia is to understand how we communicate. And in the Academy of Sport, we are working on engaging research designs that are both probabilistic but also deterministic to speak the language of the government, because they're interested in how these actions will make them look good. That's the truth.
Correct.
For us, we are interested in how these actions will add to the advancement of society. And they say the same thing, but in other words, they're interested in preserving and maintaining political power. So how do we articulate that to them? And it could be, Plato talks about We need to speak ethos, pathos, and logos so we can appeal to them with our credibility using actors like Mr. Lewis, Brian Lara, those stars and so on that have that je ne sais quoi. We need to speak to them with the logos, the logic, using the science, and the pathos, appeal to their emotion. So communicate with them on those three levels, and I think it will enhance the probability of us achieving success. But what we cannot do, I maintain this, is if we are serious about transformation and innovation, what we cannot do is not act. We need to, and I'm happy to see the conversation about partnership, we need to engage deliberately. There was a famous conference in Africa called Next Step, and the conference would always conclude with clear next steps that must be acted upon within a certain timeline. So as a result of all this fantastic discourse, I saw someone in the chat said most insightful. This was after the three gentlemen speak before. The most insightful experience they've had in a webinar in months or something of that nature. But what are we going to do as a result of that excitement?
Correct.
Are we going to engage in action?
Yeah, we need to use this as a catalyst. As we keep talking about the catalyst, we talk about COVID-19 being the catalyst, but this here is the catalyst for us to move forward, look at innovation. I know that we were looking at what do we do to provide for the ministries, provide them to understand. We talked about the pathos and the ethos and all of that. But what about our infrastructure? What about the individual NSOs and what they're putting in place, making sure that they have the right accounts in place, their finances, making sure that they have the right systems in place, the strategies, the structures, as Mr. Cato had alluded to earlier on. This is important as well for us to be able to put a proper pitch forward to the ministries. And we all need to do it. We have to pull everybody together to be able to achieve this. We can't have one NSO not achieving all of that and not coming up to scratch in those areas, and then the other one excelling, because then that puts a rift in the cohesiveness of the actual sporting fraternity. So that's something else we need to probably address going forward in terms of maybe how we do some training and that sort of thing to pull each other along. Yeah.
I just want to comment on raise some items that were coming out of the chat. I saw Mr. Jean answer one or two of them, but we had one from Queenies John, and Queenies, you and I were on the same line. And basically, Stacey, you made your comment, can the innovation be outside of the government? The example Stacey shared had little or no mention of government, but Stacey already spoke to that, so thank you for that. Ian Batiste commented on Mr. Cato, you spoke briefly on Trinidad and Tobago football. Why are stadiums difficult to fill for local professional games? Don't the professional clubs need to go out to the communities and reach out by advertising their clubs in order to attract people to local professional games? And we can answer that one afterwards because we want to stick on this topic of professional standards. Sarah Knox, I think we need to create products that will sustain the programs. And Shanice commented that she agrees that government needs to be on board with the vision of propelling the sport of Trinidad and Tobago holistically. So thank you for your comments. Right now I would like to invite Mr. Brian Lewis. He has just re-entered the room and he wants to share a few comments on this particular topic. So Brian.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm going to be very brief. As I said, it's part of an interaction and a conversation taking place. And I mean, I've been getting a lot of comments via the Samsung phone, and I'm doing that deliberately. As you know, Samsung is a partner of the International Olympic Committee. Just a little example of how marketing and branding position will become extremely important in the new normal, simply because from an entrepreneurial perspective and innovation and transformation, I hear the sentiments, but I believe sincerely, deeply and honestly that if we really want to be innovative and transformative going forward, we must see government as facilitators. Government, and I make no apologies for saying this, because this is part of the honest interaction and conversation we want. Government because of the challenges in the immediate short-term future towards medium term, as I was saying early on, in the context of the economy and financial, I don't think that we could see government as the ATM, so to speak, as the first go-to. I think that innovation and transformation calls for the sport industry, TT, to be entrepreneurial. And as I was saying earlier on, innovation means looking at how we do things. And it can't be exchanged. I would like to see the national sporting organizations, stakeholders, embrace innovation, transformation as a very key strategic pillar. And as I was saying, let's look at it totally different. Let's take away the assumption that governments will be there, because just the role of governments in the context of philosophies, political ideologies, etc., presents it's not a simple approach. I think that the sport industry, national sporting organization, athletes, we all have to strive to be in control of our own destiny, economically and financially. I know some may say it is important, it is impossible to do. I don't believe it is impossible. I believe that we need to take a different look and really focus on innovation.
I'd like to thank Brian for his brief comments. Any responses to what Brian has shared with us?
Sorry, if I may, I do. I want to, because I think a lot of times, and I heard Mr. Jean make this point earlier, he made this point. A lot of times when we talk about government, people assume it is for financial support. The government leads the infrastructure in this country, and it gives a great level of legitimacy to, especially the same way NGBs gain legitimacy from TTOC, they gain legitimacy from the government. So you can access outside resources just by virtue of being legitimized by the government. So when we talk government, we understand the precarious economic times, etc. But the partnership with the government, they are the leaders of the development or the process in this country. They're the arbiters of that. So we need to maintain a very strong relationship with the government. And that relationship may not be a monetary one for the foreseeable future, but just by aligning our standards with the national sporting policy, getting the endorsement of government for our initiatives for parliament, etc., would add significant value to things like national standard and the systemization of innovation in our processes, etc. And we can gain outside funding and outside expertise, but we need government support.
I'm going to invite the others to give us your winding statements, because we're perilously close to 11 o'clock. This has been an engaging and exciting webinar. So I'll let Mr. Jean go first, because I see you raise your hand.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to echo the sentiments expressed by Mr. Ratcliffe, because at the end of the day, it's not all monetary. Because of the government's position, they have the policy or the influence to implement policy, and also the regulations necessary to guide sport development. Because as much as we may want to develop sport, if we don't have those regulations implemented by the government, it'll all be for naught. I think Mr. Ratcliffe would have made the comment a while ago, we have persons purporting to be sport therapists and what have you, only and practicing because they did a short course. And I think that's where the government input comes in. One, because if you look at Trinidad and Tobago, I think the public service is one of the biggest employers. So anything we do, it has to work around the government. In terms of financially, I do think NGBs are sustainable. And forgive me, but I make this point every single time. If I tell any one of you here, I'm giving you the monopoly on any item in Trinidad and Tobago, you would probably be a millionaire by the end of a year or two. Understand that? In essence, what an NGB is exactly that. You are basically recognized by the government as the only organization responsible for the administration of your sport. How you use it is the other issue. You're supposed to utilize it, and as much as it's not a profit-making venture, but you should be able to monetize that industry to at least sustain yourself. And I think that is what a lot of NGBs are not doing. So in terms of summing up what I'm saying, I do think if we are truly serious about sport development, I think we need to take a look inwards, look at our administration, because it starts with the administration. Your administration sets that developmental pathway for you, or charts that, or navigate the charts the pathway, and it identifies how to navigate it. So both at the ministerial, at the governmental, and as well as within the organizational levels, we need to get back to the drawing board at this point in time. Look at what is working for us, what is not working. Look at those deficient areas that we have historically left unattended, and look at them, because within there you might find the answers that you need with regards to restructuring your administrative processes and charting a new path towards business innovation. So I think that's what I would close with. Thanks, Chair.
So again, we were thinking our administrative strategies. Thank you, Mr. Shaw, for being with us. Stacey, any final words there?
Okay, I just want to say that COVID-19 has literally exposed us. You know, a lot, even in the world of professional sport, a lot of the professional sport leagues that we have been watching have, COVID-19 has said, you know what, you are unsustainable. 2 months with no sport, and these organizations are laying off people. Some of them are actually closing down. So I think the way ahead is open to opportunity that we in fact need to exploit. I think it's no longer a case of just growth. It's innovation is now important to our survival. So if sport organizations are to survive in the coming years, I think it's important that we do not continue working as normal. It's important that we in fact be the ones to initiate change. So, you know, that's all I think. And another thing, I think we in the Caribbean are creative people. I think by nature, if we look at, we've created steel band, we have created carnival, we have created reggae. I mean, we are creative people. So we need to get our innovative juices working.
Yes, you're quite right, Stacey. Thank you for that. And I think it's important for us to remember that we are part of a Caribbean. So beyond looking at after ourselves, we can actually look at further afield to the Caribbean and how can we help each other to be innovative. So we touched on the fact that, as Mr. Brian Lewis had said, each of us will now be required to become a leader. We all need to lead individually. He also told us that we needed to look at the new generation. And so we have to pay respect to them and how do they do things? How do they want to see things? And we have to look in that direction to see how we can change in order to keep up with the times. And of course, organization must find a way to place innovation in our systems, strategies, and structures. We can't say that enough coming out from Mr. Stacey Cato. And I think it's a good wrap up because when we started, we said that COVID-19 is a catalyst for transformation and innovation in sport. It is the opportunity for us to grow, to innovate, and to transform our sporting industry. And I think this is a catalyst for that. Okay. And I think let us take it and, as we do with the torch, run with it.
So in saying thanks to you all, I just want to make mention of one. This has been on the Ministry of Youth and Sport Affairs online platform, this particular webinar. I also want to make mention of the TTOC's social media handles, Facebook and Instagram at Team TTO, Twitter, TT Olympic, and our website, www.teamtto.org. And right now I'm putting in a plug. This is Olympic month. We're celebrating Olympic month. This is basically kicked off all our activities. Look out for what the TTOC staff and the executive board will be putting out to you with regards to Olympic month. Olympic Day is on the 23rd of June, 2020. So right now, I just want to give thanks. Thanks to Giselle for being my moderator. Thanks to the presenters for being here. Mr. Atto Rockcliffe, Mr. Stacey Cato, Mr. Kevin Jar, Mr. Brian Lewis. Thank you for your insightful nuggets of information.
That's Mr. Lewis.
Thank you for our audience from far and wide for being here with us. We appreciate your comments, your commentary. Let's keep the conversation going.
Let's keep the conversation going. And we definitely will answer any other questions that come forward after Lovey will find a way to get it to you. So thanks again for spending the morning with us.
And one more thing, as you mentioned, Lovey, she's placed some stuff in the chat. Feedback, please fill it out. We want to know how we were, if you like this, if we could do more. And special thanks to Lovey for putting this on. Thank you very much.
And stay safe.